The text from my sister lit up my phone again. Oscar, the car payment is due and Mom needs help with her medical bills. I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar weight crush my chest, until Abel's hand on my shoulder reminded me that today everything might finally change. I was sitting in our Seattle apartment, the rain tapping softly against the tall windows overlooking Puget Sound. But my mind was back in the suburbs of Chicago, where my family still lived. 4 years I had been their go-to guy, the successful software engineer who could wire money with one click. It started small after Dad lost his job at the factory. A few hundred here for groceries, a couple thousand there for Lisa's wedding. Then it became monthly. You're the only one who made it out, Oscar, Mom would say, her voice sweet with that Midwestern guilt trip I could never escape. At 32, I had a solid 6-figure salary, a condo I loved, and a life that looked perfect on paper. But every time the phone rang, my stomach twisted. Abel knew. He had known for the 2 years we had been together, quietly supporting me through late-night calls where I promised my brother Mike another loan for his business idea that always seemed to fail. Abel was a high school history teacher with the calmest brown eyes and the kindest laugh I had ever heard. He never pushed, but lately his gentle reminders had grown firmer. You deserve to live your life, not fund theirs, he said one evening while we cooked pasta together. I knew he was right. Thanksgiving was 2 weeks away, and this year I had decided to bring him home. Not as my roommate or best friend like I had done at Christmas the year before. This time I would walk in holding his hand and tell them the truth. The flight to Chicago felt endless. Abel squeezed my fingers across the armrest as the plane descended through gray clouds. Whatever happens, we face it together, he whispered. I nodded, but my heart hammered. My family had never suspected. I had dated girls in high school to keep up appearances, gone to church youth group, played football like every other kid in our neighborhood. Coming out was never part of the plan because the plan had always been to keep sending money and keep the peace. When the Uber pulled up to the 2-story brick house with the same faded American flag out front, my sister Lisa was already waving from the porch. She hugged me hard, then turned to Abel with polite confusion. This is Abel, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My boyfriend. The word hung in the crisp November air like a challenge. Lisa's smile froze. Inside, Mom was pulling a turkey from the oven, Dad flipping channels on the TV, Mike raiding the fridge. The announcement at dinner was quieter than I expected. I simply said, everyone, Abel isn't just a friend. He's my partner. Forks paused midair. Mom's eyes widened. Dad cleared his throat. No one yelled. No one stormed out. Instead, an awkward silence settled over the table, and for the first time in years, no one asked me for money. Not that night. Not the next morning. By the second day of the visit, the usual texts had stopped. No. Hey bro, can you spot me for the mortgage this month? From Mike. No subtle hints from Lisa about the kids' school fees. It was as if my words had flipped a switch none of us knew existed. Abel and I took long walks around the neighborhood, the leaves crunching under our boots, and he kept asking if I was okay. I told him I was relieved, but the truth was more complicated. Part of me missed the role I had played, the reliable son, the fixer. Without the requests, I felt strangely untethered. Mom cornered me in the kitchen while Abel helped Dad rake leaves. Oscar, honey, are you sure about this? It's just different. Her voice cracked, not with anger but with something closer to fear. I tried to explain that loving Abel didn't change who I was or how much I cared about the family. She nodded, but her eyes kept darting to the window where Abel laughed with Dad. That night at dinner, the conversation stayed surface level. Football scores, the weather, Lisa's new job at the bank. No one mentioned the word boyfriend again, and no one asked for a cent. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like exile. On the third evening, Abel and I sat on the back porch under a string of fairy lights Mom had hung years ago. They're processing, he said softly, his shoulder warm against mine. Give them time. I wanted to believe him, but when my phone buzzed with a message from Mike, not asking for money but saying, we need to talk when you get back, my stomach dropped. The next morning Dad pulled me aside in the garage. "Son, I don't understand it, but if this is who you are, just know the door is still open." His words were kind, yet the distance in his voice was new. No mention of the broken furnace that usually prompted a check from me. We flew home to Seattle 2 days early. Abel held my hand the entire flight, and for the first time I let myself cry quietly against his shoulder. Back in our apartment, the silence from Illinois stretched on. A week passed with only polite holiday texts. Then the first real crack appeared. Lisa called, not to ask for money but to say Mom had been crying every night. "She thinks she failed you somehow," Lisa said. I hung up feeling raw. Abel made tea and listened as I paced the living room. "Maybe stopping the money requests is their way of punishing me," I said. He shook his head. "Or maybe it's the only way they know how to react right now." The following weekend Abel surprised me with tickets to a small jazz club downtown. We danced slowly in the dim light, his forehead resting against mine, and for a few hours the family noise faded. But when we got home my inbox had a long email from Mom. She wrote about how proud she had always been of my success, how the money had helped keep the family afloat, and how confused she felt now. She didn't ask for anything. She just ended with, "I love you, Oscar. I'm trying." I read it 3 times, tears blurring the screen. Abel wrapped his arms around me from behind. "This is the beginning, not the end," he whispered. The new year brought colder winds and deeper questions. My promotion at work meant more responsibility and ironically more money, yet the family silence on finances continued. It was almost eerie. Mike texted about his daughter's soccer games, but never the usual, "Could you help with cleats?" Lisa sent photos of the kids, but no hints about Christmas debt. I should have been grateful. Instead, doubt crept in like fog off the sound. Had my identity become the price they paid to stop treating me like an ATM? Abel noticed the shift in me during our quiet evenings. He would set down his grading papers and pull me onto the couch. "You're allowed to feel everything," he said. "Anger, relief, grief, all of it." One Friday night we hosted a small dinner with my Seattle friends, all of them queer or allies, and for the first time I talked openly about the family dynamic. They stopped asking the second I said the word boyfriend. I told them. "It's like I broke the contract." My best friend Rachel raised her glass. "Sounds like the contract was never fair to begin with." Abel stayed quiet, listening, but later in bed he admitted he worried I was tying my worth to their approval. His words stung because they were true. The first real confrontation came in February when Dad had a minor heart scare. Mom called at 3 a.m. Seattle time, voice shaking. "They're running tests, Oscar. I know things are different now, but could you maybe—" She trailed off. I waited. She never finished the sentence. I wired money anyway, old habits die hard, and flew out the next morning. Abel insisted on coming. At the hospital, the family greeted me with tight hugs but careful distance from Abel. We sat in the waiting room for hours. When the doctor said Dad would be fine with medication, the collective sigh was audible. That evening back at the house, Mike finally spoke the words everyone had been avoiding. "We didn't know how to act, man. You dropped a bomb and then nothing felt the same." I looked around the living room where I had grown up. "I never stopped being your son or brother. I just stopped being your bank." The sentence landed heavy. Lisa wiped her eyes. Mom reached for my hand but stopped halfway. Abel stood beside me, steady as ever. The conversation stretched late into the night. Awkward, painful, honest. No one apologized outright, but no one asked for money either. On the flight home, Abel rested his head on my shoulder. "You stood up for yourself today," he murmured. "That's huge." Spring arrived with cherry blossoms along Seattle streets and a new tension in my chest. Work was demanding, but the real battle was internal. I started therapy, something Abel had gently suggested months earlier, and the sessions peeled back layers I hadn't known were there. The therapist asked why I had carried the family burden so long. "Because if I didn't, who would?" I answered. She nodded. "And who are you when you're not the savior?" The question kept me awake at night. Abel was patient, cooking my favorite meals, leaving little notes on the fridge that said, "You are enough exactly as you are." One Saturday, we drove to Olympic National Park for a hike. The forest air smelled of moss and rain. Halfway up a trail, Abel stopped and turned to me. "I love you, Oscar. Not because you take care of everyone else, but because you're you." I kissed him right there on the muddy path, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise. Back in the city, we started making plans, small ones at first. A summer trip to visit Abel's parents in Portland, who had welcomed me warmly from day one. It was a stark contrast to my own family's cautious texts. Then came the email that tested everything. Mom forwarded a hospital bill Dad had tried to hide. No direct request, just the attachment and the words, "We're figuring it out." My finger hovered over the reply button. Abel watched me from across the kitchen island. "You get to choose," he said softly. I chose to call instead. The conversation was raw. "I can help with part of it," I told her. "But I need you to understand that my life with Abel is real and permanent. If that means the old dynamic changes forever, I'm okay with it." Mom was quiet for a long moment. "We're trying, honey. We really are." That night, Abel and I slow danced in the living room to an old song. No music playing, just the rhythm of our breathing. He rested his chin on my head and whispered, "You're building something new for us." I believed him. Summer brought the first real test of the new boundaries. Lisa's husband lost his job, and the familiar panic texts started. But this time they were careful, almost apologetic. "We hate to ask, but..." I read the message 3 times before showing it to Abel. He didn't offer advice. He simply said, "What feels right for you?" I wired a smaller amount than they expected and attached a note. "This is because I love you, not because I have to." The reply was a single heart emoji from Lisa. Progress, maybe. Meanwhile, my relationship with Abel deepened in quiet ways. We adopted a rescue dog, a goofy golden retriever named Max, and spent weekends exploring the city. One evening at Gasworks Park, we watched the sunset paint the skyline pink. Abel slipped an arm around my waist. "Remember the first time I met your family?" he asked. I laughed. "How could I forget?" He turned serious. "You were terrified, but you chose us anyway. That courage is why I fell in love with you." The real crisis hit in late August. Dad's health took another dip, and Mom called in tears. "The doctors say he needs a procedure we can't afford." This time the request was direct. I felt the old pull, the guilt that had defined me for so long. Abel sat beside me on the couch, hand on my knee. I told Mom I would cover half and that Abel and I would fly out to help however we could. But I also said, "This is the last time I step in like this. After this, we figure things out as equals or we figure them out separately." The line went silent. Then Mom whispered, "I understand." The trip to Chicago was different this time. The family greeted Abel with genuine, if still slightly awkward, warmth. We sat around the hospital bed playing cards, sharing stories. Dad squeezed my hand when no one else was looking and said, "Your young man seems good for you." It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a bridge. On the last night, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. "I was wrong to lean on you so hard," she admitted. "I see that now." Tears pricked my eyes. For the first time I felt seen, not as the bank account but as her son. Fall returned, and with it a new rhythm. The money requests had truly stopped. In their place came invitations to Lisa's daughter's recital, to Mike's backyard barbecue, to Mom's book club potluck. Abel and I attended some, skipped others, always together. My therapy sessions continued, but the weight on my chest had lifted. One crisp October evening, we hosted my Seattle friends again. Rachel raised a toast to Oscar, who finally stopped being everyone's hero and started being his own. I laughed, but the words landed deep. Abel and I took a weekend trip to the Oregon coast. We walked the beach at sunset, Max chasing waves. He stopped, turned to me, and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Oscar, you've grown so much these past months." I want to keep growing with you. Forever. The ring was simple platinum. I said yes before he even finished the question. We kissed as the waves roared. The sky streaked orange and pink. Back in Seattle, life settled into something peaceful and true. The family still navigated the new normal with occasional missteps, but the love was there, stripped of conditions. I had learned that setting boundaries didn't mean losing people. It meant finding myself. Abel and I planned a small wedding for next spring, just close friends and whichever family members felt ready. True or false? Family love should never come with financial strings attached.